Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. We will be discussing the application requirements for the Second Chance Act Comprehensive Community-Based Adult Reentry Program Utilizing Mentors, administered by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. My name is Roneen Davis, and I am the Grantee Technical Assistance Manager at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, which provides training and technical assistance to all grantees funded under the Second Chance Act. I oversee technical assistance provided to all Second Chance Act adult mentoring, young fatherhood mentoring, families and children of incarcerated parents, and technology-based career training grants. Joining us today is Darla Wolf, a policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance at the U.S. Department of Justice. We're very grateful to Darla for taking the time to join us today to talk about this grant program. Before we begin, I have a couple of technical notes. If you encounter connection or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx technical support at 1-866-229-3239. We'll also put that number up on the chat box on your screen. Unfortunately, there are some connection issues we may not be able to resolve during the webinar. However, we are recording today's webinar and it will be posted on our website. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email as soon as the webinar is available on our website. You may also check the website directly at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. At the end of today's webinar, we will have time for questions and answers from the audience. To ask a question, please enter it in the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can ask questions at any point during the webinar, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible before we end at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today. To get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the Justice Center. The Justice Center is a national nonprofit organization that serves policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels from all branches of government. Staff provides practical, nonpartisan advice and evidence-based, consensus-driven strategies to increase public safety and strengthen communities. We are constantly adding new content and resources to our website, and we send out a monthly newsletter that provides information about the latest research, funding opportunities, distance learning events, and other news about reentry. We encourage everyone who hasn't done so already to sign up for the newsletter by going to csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter at CSGJC. I would like to share a bit of background on the Second Chance Act for those of you who may not be familiar with it. Passed in 2008, the Second Chance Act authorizes a variety of federal grant programs that support state and local governments, tribal entities, and nonprofit organizations in providing evidence-based services intended to reduce recidivism. Technical assistance for Second Chance Act grants is provided by the National Reentry Resource Center, or NRRC, which is funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and managed by us here at the Justice Center. The NRRC provides support to Second Chance Act grantees and the broader reentry field. In fiscal year 2016, $68 million were appropriated for Second Chance Act grant programs. These dollars are distributed between adult and juvenile programs and across all different grant tracks. There are currently 4 open solicitations that have been released by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Today, we will only be talking about the Adult Mentoring Reentry Grant Program, but you can see the other open solicitations on this slide. Please visit ojp.gov/funding for additional information on these other opportunities. If you would like to receive the most up-to-date announcements anytime new solicitations are released, please sign up for our newsletter at csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. The Second Chance Act has been funding mentoring programs since it went into effect in 2009. Mentoring programs are unique in that they are the only Second Chance Act grants that are awarded to nonprofit agencies, including faith-based organizations. If you combine all the different mentoring grants, including adult, juvenile, and population-specific, such as serving young fathers or Latino youth, you find that mentoring is one of the highest funded Second Chance Act grant programs. Second Chance Act mentoring grants have taken on a number of forms. There are 3 active awards, including Comprehensive Mentoring, the grant we're talking about today, which requires programs to address reentry needs, criminogenic risk factors, and develop strong partnerships with corrections. The other 2 are administered through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention and include Young Fathers Mentoring, serving fathers ages 24 and younger in juvenile or adult facilities, and Latino and Latina youth, serving individuals that identify as Latino or Latina, also ages 24 and younger. Since 2009, 207 Second Chance Act mentoring grants have been awarded to about 182 nonprofit and tribal organizations. Here you can see that awards have been made across the country to 46 states and the District of Columbia. If you'd like to find a Second Chance Act initiative near you, please visit the website listed at the top of this slide to see a map of all Second Chance Act grants in the country. Mentoring is a wide and varied field, with the majority of the research focusing on the effects of mentoring on youth. Generally, mentoring is a pro-social relationship between 2 people where one individual supports the other in their goals. This grant solicitation allows for some flexibility in how you structure your mentoring program, partly as an effort to see what works in mentoring adults returning to their community. When proposing your mentoring model, consider if mentoring will be one-on-one, held in a group setting, or some combination of the 2. A few key characteristics of mentoring in a reentry program to remember include ensuring a strong and formal partnership with your correctional partner. A common issue among past grantees is having support from the corrections department, but not the facility where the participants are housed, or vice versa. Ensure you engage stakeholders from both. It is important to have demonstrated support from all of your stakeholders, especially corrections. Clearly lay out the policies and procedures for the program, including roles of mentors, how they will support the reentry process, the qualifications for being a mentor in your program, and how they will be screened, selected, and matched with mentees. Training should be given to mentors before they begin meeting with their mentee and should continue through their formal mentorship. Topics should include criminogenic needs and their relationship to recidivism, strategies for holding individuals accountable in the community while supporting program participation, methods to promote behavioral change like cognitive behavioral interventions and motivational interviewing, and an understanding of the criminal justice and reentry process. Ongoing data collection is key. Data should be used to guide strategic continuous quality improvement, reporting to the Bureau of Justice Assistance, stakeholders, and funders. Think about how data will be collected, shared, and analyzed in your proposed program. Consider how your program will define the role of a mentor as compared to a case manager, reentry coach, or other position. Will mentors be volunteers or employees? How will your program support and encourage the development of other post-social relationships, such as with family and community members? And who are the mentors? Peers, individuals that have found success in certain areas like employment, etc. Now I'll turn it over to Darla to speak about the Bureau of Justice Assistance and additional information on the goals of the grant and details of what is expected in the application.
Thank you, Roneen. The Bureau of Justice Assistance has supported reentry programs through the Second Chance Act across the country. BJA provides leadership and guidance for criminal justice programs and the development of criminal justice policy. You can find the grant solicitation at the website listed on this page. Please note that this webinar is a summary of the requirements, and all applicants should review the full solicitation before applying. The deadline for application is April 12th, and the award is available to nonprofit organizations, tribal nonprofits, and tribal governments. BJA is currently planning to make 7 awards of no more than $1 million each, though this could change. The award period for each grant will be 36 months. The goal of this program is to promote effective and successful reentry through comprehensive and evidence-based reentry plans that address identified needs of the individuals and are supported by mentors. All applications need to demonstrate a plan to provide mentoring and other services to a minimum of 150 individuals returning from incarceration over a 3-year period. There needs to be a memorandum of agreement or understanding that shows a collaborative relationship with the correctional agency and the facility or facilities where the program will be taking place and receiving referrals. To meet the needs of the individuals you're planning to serve and determine the risk level, you should use results from an empirically validated criminogenic risk assessment tool and must document which tool is in use. Programs are also required to provide a pre-release mentoring services. This includes screening, assessment, and enrollment into the program. Where possible, mentoring relationships should begin pre-release. If there are obstacles in accomplishing this in person, consider other methods of beginning the mentoring relationship pre-release, including video or voice calling. Pre-release services should also include transition planning and identification of eligibility of benefits and benefits enrollment. Proposals should include a comprehensive menu of post-release programs and services. Applicants must demonstrate their capability to deliver or broker evidence-based programs and services in conjunction with mentoring. You also need to describe the number of people the project plans to serve. Please include the data to show that the proposed number is reasonable. If you're requesting funds to continue or to enhance an existing program, please include the number of people the program has already served that match the state target population over the past 6 months. If this is a new program, please state the number of people that met the target population characteristics within the past 6 months. You also need to describe your mentor recruitment plan, including the number of mentors you plan to recruit, a timeline, and what community partners will be engaged in the process. If awarded, BJA will measure performance against the proposed number of mentors. Include in your plan for tracking participant outcomes for at least 12 months post-release. You need to describe how recidivism information will be obtained as well. You need to provide a baseline recidivism rate for the proposed target population. And you should include documentation to support how the rate was developed. Lastly, all applicants must provide outlines of the pre-service and in-service training curricula for mentors. Some of the key parts of that training are included in this slide, but please refer to page 7 of the solicitation for a full list of required training topics. Remember that these are a minimum of what's required, and additional training topics specific to your program or jurisdiction should be included. A priority consideration for this grant is including an independent evaluation of the project. This is key to help drive the research forward on adult mentoring in general and specifically in reentry. If you're interested in conducting research on your project, remember to engage a research partner early on to assess the cost and what capacity it will require from your agency to meet this consideration. Target population. All programs must serve a specific subset of the population of individuals that are 18 or older, convicted as an adult, imprisoned in a state, local, or tribal prison or jail, and are at moderate to high risk of reoffending based on the results of an empirically validated risk assessment tool. This slide shows how each portion of your application will be weighed. Most of the mandatory requirements I have described earlier will be split up among the statement of the problem section and the project design and implementation section. In addition to the number of mandatory requirements, the project design and implementation section is also where you'll show if and how you're meeting the priority considerations. The capabilities and competencies section mostly reviews information about your organization's capacity and culture, the management structure and staffing plan for the proposed project, and you will identify any agencies you're partnering with on this project. Data is very important for these programs. This section requires you to state the goals, objectives, and proposed outcomes for the project and your plan to measure, document, and evaluate. This includes tracking recidivism, how data will be obtained, and how effectiveness of the program will be assessed. Also include in this section of your plan for continuing the project after the Second Chance Act award period has ended. Be sure to include in your budget how much will be allocated for research and data collection, and set aside funds to send 3 staff members to 3 DOJ-sponsored meetings in Washington, D.C. There is no required match for this grant, but if an application proposes a voluntary match and receives an award, the match becomes mandatory. Required attachments for the application include a project timeline, position description, letters of support, and MOUs or MOAs. But please see pages 18 through 21 for a complete list of attachments required. Now I'll turn it back over to you, Roning, to review the important contacts and resources.
Thank you, Darla. If you need technical assistance with submitting the application, please contact the grants.gov customer support hotline provided here. The phone line and email are available 24/7 at 1-800-518-4726 or support@grants.gov. If you need assistance with any other requirements of the solicitation, please contact the National Criminal Justice Reference Service Response Center. Their hours of operation are listed on this slide, and they can be contacted at 1-800-851-3420 or at grants@ncjrs.gov. We wanted to provide some resources that are worth checking out as you're thinking through your application. The Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring is a venue for exchanging research and ideas that pertain to mentoring. The Center also runs the Chronicle of Evidence-Based Mentoring that sends out regular information on updates from the field. The National Mentoring Resource Center is a project funded by the Department of Justice's Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention and run through Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership. Though their work focuses on youth mentoring, they provide a lot of resources to support the field, including technical assistance for programs serving youth. The Mentoring Ex-Prisoners Guide was developed through a Department of Labor grant and is used widely as a reference for programs doing work with reentry and mentoring. If you're looking for more information on evidence-based practices, please visit one of these sites. Each has significant resources to point towards different types of programs and services that have been found to be effective and are certified as evidence-based. This includes the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices, run out of the Department of Health and Human Services, crimesolutions.gov, run by the Office of Justice Programs at the Department of Justice, and the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse, which you can access at our website, csgjusticecenter.org. Now we're going to open it up for questions in just a minute here. You'll find my contact information and Darla Wolf's contact information on this slide if you do have any questions after the webinar. As we mentioned at the beginning, the recording of the webinar will be available on our website, as well as a PDF of all of the slides that we went over today. Once that becomes available, everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email notifying them of that. We're going to go ahead and address some of the questions that have been coming in the chat box. So we're going to go ahead and review those, and Darla and I will address them in just a minute. So the first question that I had come up is, are the awards renewable after the 36-month award period? So the grant is for a defined period of 36 months, and once the award period is over, then the grant is over. I know that there are options in limited cases for no-cost extensions if for some reason there is money left over in the budget, but that's something that has to be approved by your program officer at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And then if new grants become available, and as a new mentoring grant becomes available, I believe you are eligible to apply for that, for those grants. Darla, is there anything else that you want to add to that question?
No, they just have to reapply after the 36 months if they want to continue.
Okay, great. All right, let's see. Another question. Can you please explain the thought process that wraparound services not being allowed pre-release, and what success have already funded projects had with getting program participants to stay with the program post-release? Okay, so we had two questions there. When it comes to the wraparound services, it's not that the wraparound services can't be offered pre-release. I believe the requirement is that the grant funds are used only for the pre-release mentoring component and for screening, assessing, enrolling, and also helping program participants access benefits. They can be receiving other services, they just can't be using grant funds for that. But I'll also check in with Darla if there's any other context that you want to put around that.
No, you covered it.
Okay, great. Always like to make sure. I always like to check in with my partners at BJA to make sure I'm not missing anything. And then the second question there was, what success have already funded projects had with getting program participants to stay with the program post-release? I can say there's a lot of, it's varied depending on the programs. These mentoring programs are very diverse, and there's a lot of different focuses. So some programs, while offering mentoring, have a focus on employment, or some have a focus on behavioral health. I will say a lot of programs have had success in keeping participants engaged post-release, but that often revolves around the relationship that was built up during the pre-release phase. Did they have a chance to meet with their mentor pre-release? And if they weren't able to meet with their mentor, were they able to meet with program staff who could connect them to the program as they transition back into the community? So it's not meeting new people, not having to set up their own appointments, that they actually have someone who can assist them. And that often is a way to have a successful transition where they're still engaged in the program. But there's a lot of different tactics that different programs have taken, and it's definitely one of the common challenges that we do see in our technical assistance that we try to address. All right, next question was whether funds can be used for post-release reentry programming and follow-up. Funds can be used for the reentry programming after they've been released from the facility. The grant funds are available to be used for additional services beyond the mentoring. All right, next question was, can you recommend the best source to determine a baseline recidivism rate? Which is a really great question. Unfortunately, not with an easy answer. When thinking about your baseline recidivism rate, you want to look at the population that you're proposing to serve, and that'll help guide where exactly you should be looking for that. So there isn't a national rate that you'd want to go to. You'd want to see in your particular state, and even breaking it down even more depending on where you are. If it could be your particular county, your particular city, and the population that you're serving. So if you're proposing to serve men ages 18 to 40 who are coming out of a county or a state prison and you're in a particular county, you might want to go to the State Department of Corrections website or your contact at the State Department of Corrections and see what their different baseline recidivism rates are and determine which of those applies to that population of men 18 to 40. But there's a lot of different places that you could go. Departments of Corrections have them. the Bureau of Justice Statistics has some information on baseline recidivism rates. I'd also encourage you to go to our website, csgjustice.org. We have information on determining baseline recidivism rates and what those could look like. Okay. We have a question about timelines. Do you have a suggested template for the required timeline? I don't believe so. Darla, is there a template that BJA prefers when they're submitting a timeline?
No, there's not a template.
Okay. So however you best want to structure that, you can choose how to structure your timeline in your application. Is it 3 separate trips to Washington for the budget, someone asked. Yes, I believe that the way that you should be budgeting it is 3 staff for 3 individual trips to Washington, D.C. The next question, may the project population include persons from federal facilities? You know, and that's what I'm not sure of, so I'm going to ask Darla if that's a possibility for these grants.
Can you say that question one more time, Roneen?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. The question was, can the population that you're serving be individuals coming from federal facilities, so federal prisons?
I'm sorry, but no, they can't.
Okay. So your target population has to be from local facilities, whether they're state, county, or city prisons. All right, can case managers serve as mentors? Also a very good question with a not as easy answer. So ideally, mentors are not going to be in the role of case managers, but oftentimes there is overlap, and there isn't a requirement in the grant that can't happen. I would just urge you to consider what those roles are, and are they really able to serve as a mentor if they're taking on the role of a case manager. Now, there are certain programs that have found a way to blend those 2 positions where the case manager role is not the primary responsibility of that mentor, but they are helping out with some of the resource connections to resources and supporting them in the community a way a case manager might. So yeah, the short answer is they could serve as mentors, but ideally, there would be some separation between someone who is filling that case manager role and someone filling the mentor role. Can the match be an addition to the $1 million, or does it have to take away from the $1 million cap? I'm going to go ahead and refer to Darla on that one.
That money would take away from the $1 million.
Okay. Thank you. Next question, another question for BJA. How soon will decisions be made following the April 12th submission deadline?
The awards would be announced at the beginning of the fiscal year on October 1st, 2016, which would be fiscal year 17.
Okay, great. And I also encourage everyone to keep an eye on the Office of Justice Programs website. That's where a lot of those announcements are made. You can find funding opportunities there as well as those who receive the awards. Next question, what are allowable costs for supportive services, for example, transportation assistance? Okay, sorry about that. What are the allowable costs for supportive services? So I believe, I would need to double check the solicitation. I know there are certain supportive services that do fall under the allowable costs. Darla, do you know if things like transportation assistance would be included in that?
I'm checking what page to refer them to in the solicitation for allowable costs. I don't know those. They need to refer to page 10 in the solicitation.
Okay, so yeah, I see it here too. So page 10 in the solicitation will talk about allowable and unallowable costs. I will say for unallowable costs, those include prizes, rewards, entertainment, client stipends, so you can't pay the clients with grant funds, gift cards, vehicles, food and beverage. So one thing that you should also look at before submitting your application is in the solicitation, it provides a link to the financial guide, and that's OJP, Office of Justice Programs Financial Guide at ojp.gov. You'd want to review that closely to make sure that what you are proposing meets those guidelines. All right. So the next question is around if they are currently a grant recipient, are they able to apply? So we have one person who has received mentoring, this particular mentoring grant before, and we have someone who has received another type of mentoring grant, one of the OJJDP grants. So I believe that they are all eligible to apply, but I'll just double check with Darla if that's the case.
Yes, they are allowed to apply.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question was asking if we could speak to the evaluation requirements. So there is that priority consideration in the grant for independent research. That is not a requirement on the grant. It is a priority consideration because BJA, as well as I think the larger field, is very interested in learning, one, what is effective in reducing recidivism, which all of these Second Chance Act grants are trying to get at, but also how effective is adult mentoring, what are effective practices within adult mentoring, and specifically what was effective around adult mentoring in the field of reentry. The priority consideration aside, in terms of evaluation, there's various requirements in terms of collecting data and being able to report on that data to BJA. You definitely encourage you to reach out to an evaluator to help come up with what additional outcome indicators that you should be looking at. You'll find in the solicitation, it'll talk about the different things that you'll have to report on to BJA, but there's definitely some other opportunities there in what you could be evaluating within your program. So I would definitely encourage you to speak with a researcher to strategize around what would be best for your proposal. Is the grant looking for established programs, or will new programs being created be truly looked at? So I know that the grant is looking at both, established programs and new programs, and I believe they're all treated fairly in that application review process. Is that right, Darla?
Yes, anyone that's a nonprofit with a 501c3 can apply. And we're looking at new programs and continuing programs.
And something to keep in mind that Darla mentioned when she was going through those mandatory requirements is you want to talk about the existing program and what the numbers look like for who you've been serving in that existing program that meet the characteristics of the proposal, the population you're proposing to serve. So someone was asking, is there a similar mentoring grant for juvenile youth 16 to 18? So the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Program at the moment has 2 grants that are serving anyone under the age of 24, and so that would include the 16 to 18-year-olds. Unfortunately, the latest round for that grant, it's a young fatherhood and a young motherhood grant, the submission deadline has already passed, and that has closed. I do encourage you to keep an eye out. The Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention does offer a number of mentoring funding opportunities. Some fall under the Second Chance Act, and some fall under different funding streams. So I definitely encourage you to keep an eye out for those if that's a population that you're looking to serve. Next question was, should the timeline include time at the beginning for planning and time at the end for obtaining results? It's a great question. I'm going to go ahead and refer to BJA about how that should be structured.
Roneen, the timeline is based on the program that the applicant is offering, and if they need to build in time for planning and evaluation at the beginning and the end, then they can do so. It's their timeline for their program.
Okay, perfect. So I definitely think if you do need time to plan, and most of the programs might, unless it's an existing program, you would want to include that in your timeline. So you want to accurately show in the timeline what your plan is from the moment you receive the grant award to the end of the award period. All right, we're just moving down the question box here. So how long of a commitment must the mentors make to guide the mentee, and is this flexible? In the case of college students as mentors, which is contingent upon semesters, is this an option to have 4 months of commitment? So there actually is not a requirement here around what that commitment should look like. I will say that some of the best practices coming out of mentoring for youth have said 6 to 12 month commitment. But again, this isn't a requirement. So if your program is working with, for instance, college students, and it works best for you to have a shorter commitment, that if that's how you prefer to structure the program, I think that's fine. Again, the best practices are pointing towards 6 to 12 months, so I would keep that in mind during the proposal. There are other things to consider when talking about what that commitment could look like and what your mentoring model would look like. There are ways of combining one-on-one mentoring with group mentoring to try and address some of those issues. So those are just some different options. I would definitely encourage you to check out the National Reentry Resource Center and the Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring to get a little bit more information on what's going on in that area. There's a question about tracking participant outcomes. The grant requires a plan to track participant outcomes for at least 12 months after release. Does this apply to those who are released in the last months of the program and extend after the 3 years of the grant? So you do want, I know that the grant does require that you are tracking their outcomes for at least 12 months. If it's going to be after the 3 years of the grant, I know there's a few considerations there. One is if you have money left in your budget, there is the possibility for putting in a no-cost extension, which would mean you'd be able to extend the award period. If your grant funds are done at the end of 3 years and you have people who've enrolled, when it comes to tracking those outcomes after 12 months, I do not believe it's something that would need to be reported directly to BJA after the award period is over, but I would definitely encourage you to continue tracking those outcomes if you have the capacity to do so, because then that can reflect how well the program has done. Darla, I just want to check in with you too, though, if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
No, I concur with what you said. You were correct.
Okay, great. So someone asked, can this grant be used for a capital project like building of a training center for mentors and potential clients? I do not believe so. I'll go ahead and refer to Darla on that one, though.
No, that is not proper use of the funds.
Okay. Next question has to do with the risk requirement. So understanding that the criteria for initial eligibility is that the client be assessed at moderate or high risk for recidivism. If the client at a subsequent assessment is then downgraded to low risk, will he or she still be eligible to be included? In my understanding is yes. When it comes to the requirement that they be moderate to high risk for reoffending or for recidivism, that is at the enrollment phase of the program. So anyone who, when you're talking about who is eligible to be in your program and who is eligible to enroll, they would need to be moderate to high risk. If through the services that you're providing and through the supports that they're receiving, if they get a follow-up assessment and that downgrades their risk level. That doesn't mean that they can no longer receive services, but it does mean that you'd want to assess what services they're receiving, and maybe they don't need as intensive of services anymore if they've been downgraded. Great question here about connecting with your correctional institution. So what successful strategies have been implemented to receive the MOU or MOA from correctional institutions or partners? That's a really great question. There are a lot of different ways of approaching this, and there are definitely grantees who have struggled with this. My main suggestion is definitely finding the person at that facility who you can connect with one-on-one, in person, who has influence over the programming that happens in the facility. And you want to make sure that you have the ear of that person before you submit your application, so that you can have a definitive partnership in place when you do submit your application. So definitely getting in the room with that person, talking to them about what the program is going to be doing, and talking about how this program is going to be beneficial for the institution, as well as how it's going to benefit the participants. So one thing that I have seen recently with a few grantees is they've been noticing that folks taking part in their program, in the pre-release component of their program, have seen the number of incidents in the facility with those particular participants have gone down, and the number of behavioral infractions have gone down. So that could be something that you could talk about with your correctional partner. Discuss it. Also, bringing them into the program planning process has been something that's been shown to be successful. So instead of going to them, asking them to be a partner and leaving it at that, actually having them be a part of the strategy session, actually having them be a part of planning out what the pre-release component of that program is going to look like. How are you supporting them, as well as how are they supporting you? So those are a few different things to think about when approaching your corrections partner. And also walking in with the understanding and expectation that a corrections agency is definitely going to have a very different culture than a nonprofit agency, and understanding that they'll be coming from a much more of a security mindset, and being ready for that conversation. All right, so someone asked, if the mentoring program is operated by a university, could someone from a different department of the same university be the evaluator as well? So this is touching on the priority consideration, which is about having an independent evaluation. And I'm not sure, actually, if someone from a different department would count as an independent evaluator in this situation. Darla, is this something that you would know?
The independent evaluator would need to be outside of the sources of the university. So it could not be an evaluator of another department. It had to be outside the university.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. They couldn't be a part of the same university. And there are other options for evaluators. So obviously universities are a good place to go for evaluators. There are some nonprofit agencies that focus on doing research. There are also independent evaluators who run their own independent consulting firms or evaluation firms that you could also reach out to. All right, next question was, do we enter October 1st, 2016 as the project start date in the federal SF424 application form? So I'll pass that on to my partner at BJA.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
October 1, 2016.
Okay, wonderful. And the next question was, can we pay stipends to mentors? And I believe the answer is yes. Grant funds can be used to provide stipends to mentors. Is that correct, Darla?
Yes, Roneen, that is correct.
Okay, great. I know that other grants have done that in the past, so I want to make sure that that wasn't a change, but it sounds like that's still a possibility. And then in addition to stipends, I know that some mentoring grants have also hired mentors as staff members, and because that was how their model was set up, so that's something else that you can consider. So someone asked, what is meant by reach out to an evaluator? When we're talking about being in touch, if you do have an independent evaluator for your program, just having them involved early on in the process, just as we talked about possibly having your correctional partner be involved in that planning process, you want your evaluator to be familiar with the program early on and have a say in how you're coming up with the data tracking systems and knowing which outcomes you're going to be looking at and what the process is for collecting that data, what the process is for analyzing that data, so that you're not struggling 6 months to a year down the line with how the information is being given to that evaluator, so that they and so they're not asking for information that you're not already collecting. So you reach out to them early on, and that's just having regular meetings with them as a partner in your program. The next question was, do we need to budget funds for an IRB review if we propose an evaluation? So I know that there are research requirements around doing an independent evaluation like this. So I'll go ahead and refer to BJA. Darla, do you know if they would need to budget for an IRB review if they're doing an evaluation?
Yes, they would need to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question was, do we need both MOUs and letters of support from program partners? For your correctional institution, you need an MOU or an MOA or some form of written agreement that is stronger than a letter of support. But beyond the correctional partner, I believe the other program partners, all you require is, or a letter of support would suffice. You could also do an MOU or a contract, or depending on what the relationship with that partner is. The next question has to do with the budget worksheet. The budget worksheets are for the whole 36-month period, and the question is, how do you want the budget broken down? I'll go ahead and refer over to BJA on that one.
The budget should be broken down by year, but the entire budget for the 3-year period is on the worksheet.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, the next question. May we submit questions about the solicitation after today, and if so, to whom do we direct those questions? So you absolutely can submit questions about the solicitation after this webinar has concluded. Depending on what you're asking, there is the National Criminal Justice Reference Service Response Center that I mentioned before. So we do have their contact information on the slides, and you can also email them at grants@ncjrs.gov. You're also welcome to direct questions to myself or Darla at BJA. And Darla, is there any other avenue that they should use if they do have questions about the solicitation?
No, the email addresses that's on the slides or on the solicitation are the preferred email addresses that they should use.
Great. So that email address I mentioned before, the grants@ncjrs.gov, that's provided in the solicitation, and that's definitely the place you'd want to go for those for any questions that come up. And then again, if there's any issues with actually submitting the application, you'd want to email support@grants.gov to deal with any of those issues. All right, next question has to do with incentivizing the participation from program participants or mentees. The question is, can we provide incentives in the form of gift cards to get their participation in an evaluation study, or to provide information at the 12-month outcome follow-up? If so, what would be an appropriate value? So I don't actually believe you can. Now I'm thinking about it, when we were looking at the unallowable uses, one of them is gift cards. So if you do have a funding source that's not from this grant, you are welcome to use that external or that additional funding source to pay for something like that. But grant funds can't be used for gift cards for program participants. but I also do encourage you to refer to the OJP financial guide, because that will really break down what items are not allowable for award funds or grant funds. And then, oh, someone's asking me to repeat something. Can you please repeat what you said about the MOU versus letters from partners in the correctional facility? Yes, I apologize for that. Your correctional partner, you are required to have either an MOU, an MOA, or some form of formal written agreement that is stronger than a letter of support from your correctional partner. Beyond that, with your other partner, if you're partnering with any other agency in this program, we definitely encourage you to have formal agreements with them, but for the purposes of the application, a letter of support would suffice. But it is your correctional partner that you need to have some form of MOU or MOA or some other written agreement that is stronger, has a stronger force behind it than a letter of support. Okay, we're just checking to see if there are any additional questions that we may have missed. And feel free to continue if you do have any other questions, feel free to submit those. Okay, so one question was, can some of the incentives from this funding be in the form of deposits on rent? And yeah, I'm not sure if that is an allowable use for the funds. Darla, do you know if that would be an allowable use?
No, that's not an allowable use for the funds.
Okay. So again, if you're talking about providing deposits for rent, as like rental assistance for the program participants, I definitely would encourage you to seek out program partners in your community who might be able to support you in those efforts. Same thing with those gift cards or other incentives for program participation. But these particular, the funds from this particular grant cannot be used for that. And the next question was, this is a good question, will these question and answers be posted somewhere? That's a great question. So we'll be posting the recording of this webinar, so you will be able to hear the question and answer session. And we'll go ahead and see if we can summarize the questions after the fact and possibly include those in the slides as well. So we'll see if we can go ahead and get those out to you as well. And then the next question was, is it possible to provide housing for participants through the grant? I'm guessing the question is it possible to provide housing for the participants? I'm guessing they're asking for using grant funds to pay for that housing. Again, I don't believe you can use it as an incentive. If you are an agency where housing is a part of your programming, I mean, that could be a part of what your agency does. Darla, if they are let's say they're a housing agency that is doing reentry mentoring and is going to use the grant for this, would those grant funds be able to also go towards supporting the housing component of their work, or would that still be an unallowable use?
I think I would need to refer to the financial guide and research that, because I think that's a gray area. I'm not 100% sure that you could use your funds for the funding of the housing. Okay, good point.
Yeah, so definitely review that financial guide for. But then I would also, this might be a good question to submit to that email address that I mentioned before, the grants@ncjrs.gov, and then we can, once you submit it there, we can actually do the research and get back to you with an answer on that. Okay. Next question, can grant funds be used for participants' employer-required clothing, GED test fees, and reinstatement of an employment-related license? I'll go ahead and refer to Darla on that. So they're asking about clothing for their employer, the GED test fees, and reinstating an employment-related license.
Yes, you can assist with the test fees, and hopefully you have partners that you can direct the mentees to assist with clothing, where you're not having to give them vouchers for clothing, but that can also be part of your proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question was, and we're coming up on 3 o'clock, so I think we can get maybe one more question in here. Is partnering with community correction agencies allowable? You are allowed to partner with them, but community corrections means it plays out differently in different states. So if your community correction agencies are other nonprofit agencies that are contracted through the the State Department of Corrections, that would not count as your correctional partner. Is my understanding of the grant. So if your community correction agency is something that is part of the Department of Corrections, it's run by the Department of Corrections, I believe in Oklahoma they have a community corrections facility that is an actual correctional facility. It's just a lower level of security than most of the state prisons. That I think would be allowable as a correctional partner. Oh, and I'm sorry, also community corrections could be obviously probation and parole. Again, you can definitely, and we do encourage you to partner with probation and parole, but they could not count as your correctional partner because you are required to be providing pre-release screening and enrollment, assessment, and mentoring services. All right. And I think that's about it. If we did miss your question or you do have additional questions, as we mentioned, you're welcome to reach out to us. You can also reach out to the grants at ncjrs.gov to address those questions. And as I mentioned before, we are going to be releasing a recording of the PowerPoint and the slides, and we will review the questions so that we can get a Q&A list or maybe a frequently asked questions list out there as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and conclude the webinar. We will be emailing a link to the recording of this presentation, as I mentioned before, as well as the PDF. They'll be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center's website, which you can access at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. While there, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter if you haven't done so already. And thank you again to Darla from the Bureau of Justice Assistance for helping us out today and talking about the grant program. And thank you all again for joining us, and good luck with your applications.